If there's one thing I love beyond anything else in video games, it's the classics. Those games made back in the day where the graphics may not have been incredible, their worlds weren't the size of countries, and things like battle passes didn't exist. But those older games had something we didn't see as often. They had heart and soul, and usually as time passes on, those games kind of get left behind. Thankfully, there was a studio named Bluepoint Games that took some of these older games and then remade them completely so that newer generations could also enjoy them. They did Shadow of the Colossus, Demon's Souls, Metal Gear Solid, Uncharted, the Nathan Drake Collection, God of War, and many, many more. Bluepoint were masters at taking older games and then bringing them forward to newer generations. Sure, people had problems with things they would do depending on the remake. I mean, for example, a lot of people didn't like the visual changes that they made to Demon's Souls, for example. That's one of them anyways. But largely speaking, I think personally that Bluepoint was a net positive on the industry, and there were plenty of games that they could have remade going forward. My hope was always that they were going to remake Dark Souls after Demon's Souls, but then the news came out, and this is from Bloomberg, where they confirmed that Sony has officially closed down Bluepoint and laid off all of its staff effective immediately. This has, I'm not kidding, pissed off pretty much everybody across social media, and I agree 100% that this was not the right move whatsoever by Sony at all. And this also proves to me more than anything that Sony's priorities are completely out of whack. They've lost all sense of knowing what their fans want these days, and they're heading down a path I personally believe will do nothing but continue to dilute and ruin the PlayStation brand going forward. Bluepoint was founded in 2006 by veterans who used to work at Retro Studios. You know, the people who do Metroid Prime and more? Yeah, those same guys. Anyways, they were a group of talented developers that weren't about really chasing trends, or making live service shooters, or building some new battle pass nonsense. They were doing something much harder than any of that. They were rebuilding history. It was never about nostalgia baiting people into buying these games either. It was all about resurrection and making these games into something special so that we could all relive what made us love these sorts of games all over again. Demon's Souls, despite what people say about the character visuals, I personally still found that remake to be very fun to play, but I do agree that some of the visual changes were not very good. But we still can't deny that the technical state of that game was solid. The haptic feedback of all the PS5 controller things was honestly insane. I mean, you could feel the steel of your sword bouncing when you sliced into armor, or how your shield felt through the controller when you bounced and attacked back. It felt amazing. I can still feel the sensation of like playing Demon's Souls in my hands in that remake, because in my opinion, it had some of the best haptic feedback ever on PS5 to this day. But I think what Bluepoint proved more than anything was that you didn't need live service to justify next generation budgeting nonsense. What you really needed was passion and craftsmanship from people who actually cared about gaming to make something really special. And clearly that quietly contradicted the direction that Sony would want to take the PlayStation brand, and it was all for the worse. Bluepoint, however, was bought by Sony in 2021 and then closed down just 5 years later. It was a mess if you ask me, a complete misfire, and proves to me that Sony doesn't really understand what people want anymore. Their entire approach to content pivoted and suddenly became about live service multiplayer titles all over, ensuring that their games had reoccurring revenue models, and that Sony's promise is that they wanted over 10 live service games built from the ground up to usher in a new era of PlayStation games. This led to a lot of redirecting. Studios that never made live service games got pivoted to create the games that they weren't comfortable with. Projects got reshuffled, and then even Bluepoint Games, a studio all about rediscovering the magic of video games through remakes, were suddenly pushed to make a live service game as well. Bluepoint was tasked by Sony's new creative direction to abandon remaking older games and instead use their talent to create a God of War live service game instead. As MPFirst.com reported last year, this God of War live service game was going to be set back in Greece, as in like the original games. They also show some in-game renders of the environments in this cancelled game, but not sure I can show those without Sony, probably striking my channel, so I better not show them. But basically, just imagine Greek architecture, but now it's in 4K HD. I'm sorry. I would show it to you, but you know how companies are about these things. Anyways, this game got cancelled by Sony after Bluepoint invested heavily into it. The reason why they were doing this game in the first place was because, in case you don't know this, Bluepoint also co-developed a little game called, God of War Ragnarok as well. So naturally, since they co-developed Ragnarok, they became uniquely positioned to understand how a game like this would work, hence the live service version they were doing. I still can't believe that Sony uniquely had a first-party studio that was intimately aware of how to remaster and remake games and develop things like God of War, War, Metal Gear Solid, Demon's Souls, Shadow of the Colossus, and Ico, and more, and went, yep, we're closing them down. Apparently, this God of War live service game had Hades in it as well. He was the owner of the armory that you would access, which probably meant that this game was likely a prequel of sorts before the events of the God of War game starring Kratos, because Hades was still alive, obviously. After Sony axed this God of War game, Bluepoint's next project was hinted by job listings to be a third-person action game, which could have been a God of War remake, and now that we know officially that the trilogy is being remade at Sony Santa Monica right now, I would wager that Sony took the project from Bluepoint and then moved it over there instead, and then closed them all down. Still, the closing of Bluepoint, it makes zero sense, because their closure had nothing to do with that team's talent at all. It was all Sony's fault, and really, it was the fault of one man that many PlayStation fans are starting to loathe the longer he's in power. That man is Hermen Hulst. To understand the shift in Sony's priorities and what they were chasing, you have to understand the man at the center of all of these decisions. Hermen Hulst is the co-founder of Guerrilla Games, the makers of Killzone and Horizon. To say that Horizon Zero Dawn was a massive success would be an understatement, because it was. It ushered in a new era for Sony PlayStation and sold millions of copies. It was also a game that combined open world with cinematic storytelling with next generation graphics at the time. Due to the massive success of Horizon, Hermen Hulst was offered to lead PlayStation Studios, to create a PlayStation that could replicate the success of Horizon but across everything. Because of this, Hermen Hulst becoming the architect, if you will, of Sony's first-party strategies going forward, and under his own leadership, PlayStation's expansive got, let's just say, very, very aggressive. There were many studio acquisitions. Suddenly Sony wasn't exclusive anymore, but they were releasing their games on PC platforms like Steam, as you know, and a big push also for multiplayer and live service investments all over, dude, like everywhere. Hermen Hulst wasn't just destroying PlayStation yet, but he was transforming it into something that it clearly wasn't before. Sony was going from these prestige single-player dominance offering amazing games that defined their console for years, to what I can only really call portfolio diversification, really, and unfortunately, not every studio would survive this new era and shift. One of the biggest misfires of Hermen Hulst's reign of PlayStation was actually Concord, a $400 million dumpster fire that was also meant to be the next Star Wars and the face of PlayStation for decades to come, and that is real and really pathetic, but it's true. Sony invested heavily into Concord, even buying the studio behind it, which is Firewalk Studios, to lead the charge. The game, as we all know, died in 2 weeks and was scrubbed from Sony's servers after appallingly low player numbers. But at its heart, it was, as Colin Moriarty of Last Stand Media, as seen here, said himself, he was told by people close to Concord that that game was not only overtly expensive, but was also Hermen Hulst's baby. Hermen genuinely believed that Concord was the future of PlayStation. I mean, it was live service. There were plans for cross-media promotions through Amazon's Secret Level show, where it had an entire episode. They even planned more shows, even movies and then some, to expand Concord into their own unique universe. But after realizing that Concord would cost millions of dollars to keep it alive every single month to keep going, and it was generating like no money at all, Sony would pull the plug. Why in the holiest of hells was Hermen Hulst still allowed to then lead PlayStation after this massive blunder? I question that honestly to this day. Because if you lose your company hundreds of millions of dollars and you cause reputational damage to the brand, that being PlayStation, you would normally be removed, replaced, and told, hey, your vision is not working clearly. But instead, Hermen was just allowed to stay as the head of PlayStation and continue his vision despite all of these massive losses and layoffs. Firewalk would be closed soon after, but again, after Hermen Hulst's reign, we've lost plenty of studios already too. Like, look at this image. Everything here, including Bluepoint Games, was closed all under Hermen Hulst's watchful eye. Japan Studio closed in 2021, Pixel Opus in 23, Neon Koi in 24, London Studio in 24, Firewalk also in 24, and now Bluepoint in 26. All of these studios, millions of dollars spent to keep them alive or acquire them in the first place, with both nothing to show for them and instead just a graveyard of lost potential, all under the watchful eye of Hermen Hulst himself. This guy is ruining PlayStation. I'm just gonna say it how it is. People can get mad at me all they want, but I have to say it if others won't do it. Hermen Hulst made one very successful game in Horizon Zero Dawn and then decided that he apparently knew what Sony had to become to continue to be successful. And all he's done is actually ruin everything that he touched rushed afterwards. Horizon Forbidden West didn't do as well as Zero Dawn. The Horizon Lego game flopped. Nobody remembers the Horizon VR game. There's that Horizon Hunters Gathering game that's coming too, another live service from Sony because yeah, we need more of that, don't we? And they even, and I'm not kidding, as seen here, announced by Sony officially, Horizon Steel Frontiers, an MMO of all things that is being built for mobile and PC. Yeah, you heard that one right. This game isn't even coming at release on PlayStation, despite the game being an IP that wouldn't exist without that platform. None of this makes any sense, and I wager that Horizon Steel Frontiers will probably fail as well, and again, all of this is being pushed by Hermen Hulst because again, Horizon's his baby and that's what legitimized him, I guess. Is it really any surprise that all of the unique games have either been axed or destroyed, yet suspiciously anything with the name Horizon on it is suddenly greenlit by Hermen because this is what he thinks legitimizes his reign at PlayStation? For God's sakes, they remade Horizon Zero Dawn already, a game released in 2017, yet Bloodborne sits at 30 FPS on PS4 with no remaster of any kind to this day. If only Sony had a studio that could have remastered Bloodborne for them into 60 FPS and 4K. Oh, that's right, they did, but they kind of laid off everyone instead and closed down that entire studio, because Hermen forced them to make a God of War live service game that for the millionth time didn't see the light of day like so many other games before it. Remind me again why this guy should be running the PlayStation empire exactly. Like almost every decision he makes doesn't work. For every success, like a Helldivers, or I guess the first Horizon, we get like 5 or more blunders instead. The PS5 generation, arguably from a first-party standpoint, has been one of the worst lineups in PlayStation history in my opinion. Every game, aside from Yote costing way too much to make from the previous games in these franchises too. And the only real success stories being Ragnarok, I guess to name just something that actually crossed $1 billion in revenue. And by the way, Ragnarok, as we all know, was single player, but don't tell Hermen that because he might close down Sony Santa Monica next if he finds out that too, because it's not live service. Robert Morrison, a developer who worked on Last of Us, God of War 2018, and Resident Evil 7 to name just a few, he said it how it is on Twitter, as you can see here, that we need to start normalizing laying off executives and not developers, and I agree. Hermen Hulst has done disastrous damage to PlayStation as a brand. The entire thing is losing its identity because Hermen and his yes men keep pushing for no more exclusivity with their games, which obviously devalues PlayStation by the way, chasing nothing but live service nonsense and ruining what people want, which is of course single player games. Then Jacob Navok, another guy who works in games, pushed back against Robert Morrison, that developer I just showed you, saying, as he said here in response, Sony executives pivoted to live service games because single player couldn't drive revenue. Look at the Spider-Man 2 costs and performance. Don't get mad at Sony for doing the rational thing and placing bets on the more profitable potential output. If you know single player games are losers, you're better off attempting the live service route, even if 9 out of 10 times they don't make it. This is just rational business decision making. Let me repeat that for you. This Jacob guy said that it's better to make live service games that fail 9 times out of 10 than to make a single player game instead. Again, this is their mentality across the board. This is why they're getting so many live service titles over actual games anymore that are being made. Because Hermen Hulst and people like this Jacob dude here believe that it's better to take every studio that you own under your entire company umbrella and then just push them to make live service slop over and over again. Because even if 9 out of the 10 times you fail, the one time you succeed was clearly worth it. This is where we're at with AAA development and first-party studios. Remember back in the day when you were spoiled with first-party offerings from Sony alone? Now you're lucky to get even one game a year at best from Sony that does that anymore. And claiming that single-player games don't drive sales is insane, or even arguing that exclusives don't matter is also just wrong, when Nintendo and their Switch platform has been raking in billions doing just that. Nintendo has kept their ecosystem locked since day one. They don't share nothing with nobody made in-house for since they began pretty much. Unless you pirate their games, I guess, the only way you're going to be playing Zelda, Mario, or Pokemon is obviously going to be on any Nintendo platform. But this is why Nintendo continues to dominate, because they know that their exclusives will sell. Sony has opened the floodgates already. Now there's frankly no reason to really own a PlayStation over a PC these days, because nothing is exclusive, and Hermen is killing that platform with his moronic decisions. Bluepoint didn't deserve any of this to happen to them at all, okay? They were a casualty in the ongoing war of executives all trying to create 1,000 Helldivers and Fortnites, not realizing that the amount of institutional knowledge that they are losing in the long run because they want to be the one to make the next Arc Raiders or something. Like the Demon's Souls remake did pretty well. Look at the Metacritic score even. Bluepoint delivered a game that people actually enjoyed. Despite the changes to things like character models annoying some people, Bluepoint routinely still released highly optimized remakes that sold well and were still critical hits. This now makes me worried if Sony tries to acquire, say, Ember Lab. That's the makers of Kenna Bridge of Spirits and Scars of Cosmora. If I were Ember Lab, do not under any circumstances get obtained by Sony, because they will probably try to pivot you guys as well from your beautiful single-player games into some slop live service game instead. But it all makes sense now why Sony went and bought Bungie for what they did, because Bungie only makes live service games. Yet despite buying Bungie, Destiny 2 has floundered for years now, becoming increasingly irrelevant and hemorrhaging players all over. Marathon is, well, I mean, truly their last chance. But in Sony's eyes, if Marathon fails, which I doubt it will, but let's say that if it does, it's okay. Apparently, because as long as, one good live service game comes out of all of these grays scattered all over, it'll still be worth to them, I guess. If you ask me, I'm just gonna say it, Sony kind of sucks at making live service games. I mean, Helldivers was clearly an anomaly. Marathon, we'll see. It's not out yet as of the making this video anyways. But largely speaking, it's been nothing but flops. I mean, all these studios, millions spent with nothing to show for any of it pretty much. Constantly pitching ideas, starting up a game, killing it halfway into development, restarting it again, and then laying off more people again. Like, this can't be the way that Sony thinks it's going to be fostering talent anymore in the future. Bluepoint being the latest victim is sadly not surprising, because everything Bluepoint stands for is not what Sony wants anymore too. They don't want to remake older games. They want battle passes and cosmetics sold at a premium so that they can ensure that Herman Hulst always flies first class with a bottle of champagne beside him when he travels to tell the next studio that, oh, you're closing down too. Just listen to how tone-deaf Herman Hulst is. This is from a company-wide email that got shared where Herman confirmed that Bluepoint is dead. Listen to this when I say and tell me how any of this makes sense to you. Hello everyone, I wanted to share an important update from the studio business. As I mentioned in the December town hall, 2025 had some strong highlights within PlayStation Studios. Ghost of Yotei launched a critical commercial success. Death Stranding 2 further showcased our commitment to narrative excellence apparently, and Helldivers 2 and MLB The Show continue to drive ongoing player engagement and revenue. At the same time, we're operating in an increasingly challenging industry environment. Rising costs, slowed industry growth, changing player behavior, and broader economic headwinds are making it harder to build games sustainably. To navigate this reality, we need to continue adapting and evolving. We're taking a closer look at our business to ensure we're delivering today while still well positioned for the future. As a result, we'll be closing Bluepoint Games in March. This decision was not made lightly. Bluepoint is an incredibly talented team, and their technical expertise has delivered exceptional experiences for the PlayStation community. Dude, come on. He wants to thank everyone and blah, 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 and he basically says like, oh, this is all bad and whatever, but we're very strong from the future. The usual CEO gobbledygook nonsense. This guy is tone deaf. We continue to apparently stay committed to story-driven games, but yeah, Bluepoint is dead and gone, which kind of kept that sort of thing alive, by the way, Herman, in case you forgot. The fact he even goes as far as to say that Bluepoint was amazing, yet he ended them anyways. This man needs to be stopped being placed in the driver's seat before he causes more damage, honestly. By the time Herman ends up leaving PlayStation, it's going to become some twisted version of like Activision meets Blizzard with a Sony logo attached to it instead. These sorts of decisions, they kill everything around it, but it's fine, guys, don't worry. As long as 1 out of 10 live service games do well, the layoffs will keep coming. Because, screw people's livelihoods and institutional knowledge, right? Why does that matter? We need another Fortnite, apparently. At least some good news comes of this. Marek Tominsky, that's the CEO of CI Games, the makers of Lords of the Fallen 1 and 2. He reached out publicly, as seen here, to anyone affected by the layoffs at Bluepoint and asked them if they wanted to join the CI Games team in making Lords 2 or even working on their future games. Again, the institutional knowledge lost from Bluepoint shutting down is insane. And anyone who can grab some of those developers there who know how to optimize games and such, which is obviously very important, it's a great catch if you can do that. But ultimately, Bluepoint's closure wasn't an isolated event, unfortunately. The industry is, recalibrating itself, and when corporations tend to do this sort of thing, specialists are oftentimes some of the first to disappear, which is completely wrong to me. So it's not that Bluepoint failed creatively. It was always in my mind that they were simply caught in this strategic crossfire, or however you want to put it, pretty much. And it's never not going to annoy me that Sony keeps making all the wrong moves like they keep doing these last couple of years. Look, okay, Blue Point was a bridge between generations for many players. They proved that you could honor the past without exploiting others like so many others do these days. They prove that fidelity matters to people, and their closure, it marks the end of a very particular era of PlayStation. That of quiet excellence, of respecting the past while, forging that future and ensuring that amazing games of the past are both celebrated and respected like they should be, instead of chasing what doesn't matter to anyone but executives who are completely out of touch. But for Sony PlayStation as a collective whole, the question now comes down to this. Is what Hermen Hulst is doing with his power over Sony an evolution of PlayStation, or is it just more erosion? Time will tell, but based on the track record so far, Hermen has done far more damage than he has done good for Sony. And this isn't the end of the industry changing. I mean, not even close, but Blue Point, they deserved better. Japan's studio deserved to exist. All of these studios, maybe minus Firewalk because he did Concord, should have been given a chance at least to make something new. But hey, I guess none of this matters as long as 1 in 10 live service games does well, right, Hermen? I mean, what's next? You're gonna shut down Insomniac? Why don't you go shut down Sony Santa Monica if they don't make you another Battle Pass heavy cosmetic game instead too? At what point are we going to finally realize that the fault of what's going on here isn't Blue Point or anyone else? It's the people at the top. And until that top of that pyramid or whatever gets fixed, the people below it, the actual workers who make the games that we know and love, they're going to be the ones that suffer immeasurably, not the people above. That really sucks, dude. But don't worry, guys. Please be excited for the next 50 Horizon projects because Hermen needs his ego healed even more. What's next, Hermen? Horizon Dating Simulator? Maybe a Horizon Souls-like. Why not a Horizon platform or a first-person shooter? But yeah, just ignore Bloodborne and things that people actually want. This whole situation makes me sick. I'm so disappointed in Sony PlayStation, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. What do you think of the direction of Sony? Have a great day, and let's hope one day Sony realizes the error of their ways before it's too late. But hey, as long as 1 in 10 live service do well, right, Hermen? My god, dude, pathetic.